Hi everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 124 of Album of the Day. And before we get into the review, just want to let you know that I probably won't be talking like too loud in this video because I do have a little bit of a cold. My throat's a little sore and stuff like that. So so I'm not gonna talk too loud or anything like that. I will admit I am feeling a little better, just making you guys aware that I do have a little bit of a cold here. But I'm still here to do a review of an album from one of my favorite bands of all time that I've been wanting to talk about on this channel for a while, and finally I'm just out, talking about them on camera. You guys, to tell you guys to check them out. They are a Southern California rock band that's I could definitely has kind of a sound that's kind of a blend of some folk rock, indie rock. You could definitely label these guys indie rock, and it would make sense probably. And also so yeah, I'm talking about the Southern California rock band known as Dawes, who have been around since about 2009. Released their debut album that year, and since then have sort of developed a lot of respect as a live band, as well as a bit of a cult following, as well as lots of critical acclaim off of their first two records, pretty much. So I'm here to review their fifth studio album, which was just released September 16th, 2016. The new album is called We're All Gonna Die. And this is, and of course, this is Dawes' fifth studio album, and their third album to be released on their own label, Hub Records, after leaving their previous record label, ATO Records, where they were signed for their first two LPs. Yeah, and and I would say, what I really like about Dawes is how they definitely have the ability to write a very moving and a very just they have the ability to tell a great story thanks to the lyrical genius that is the band's frontman Taylor Goldsmith, as well as kind of the natural laid-back vibe that they've been so much about since their first record, North Hills. The harmony, and also they also do really nice with blending together the guitar, the keyboards, the bass, the drums, and the harmonies. They pay such great attention to the details, and they definitely they're definitely influenced by a lot of the great American songwriters, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, etc. And they also definitely have sort of an indie status, pretty much. So anyway, let me show you this. The album cover here, not the best album cover. It definitely, it's maybe a little kind of, it's maybe a little safe for an album art, but it'll do. There's a picture of the band there. There's a disc. Another picture of the band there. So the rest of their lineup consists of Griffin Goldsmith, who plays drums and sings backup vocals, and occasional lead vocals too. And Wiley Gelber on bass. And they've had over 3 keyboardists, Alex Kasnoff, Tay Strathairn, and now Lee Pardini. Since last year, Tay actually left the band. And here's more pictures of the band, lyrics in there. Nothing too interesting here with the artwork here. just photos here and the cover art as well. But it's good enough. Yeah, and this album is produced by a former bandmate of, like, the band, like, when the band, like, this is produced by Blake Mills, who, like, played in a version of this band. Before they were just named Dawes, they were called Simon Dawes, which I didn't really find that out until just recently. But anyway, that's the packaging for We're All Gonna Die, the new album from Dawes. Now, this record definitely has pretty much everything that I definitely would expect on a really good Dawes record, but it's definitely got a new sort of, they definitely went in a new direction with this album too. This album, I definitely do think, is the band's boldest, their most ambitious, and their most accessible album to date, I think. Which has something to do with Blake Mills on production here. He did produce the last Alabama Shakes record, which of course I do, which that is definitely a great record, easily one of my favorites of last year. And also, like, they got a new keyboardist in the band, Lee Perdini, who definitely is bringing a different kind of, sort of musical background to the table, bringing in more, like, bringing in some keyboard instruments that I would have never expected on a Dawes record, more like some more more synthesizers and stuff like that, but, not in a way that's, like, super, like, poppy or straightforward or anything like that. In a way that definitely makes a little more sense, in the sense of a band that's definitely got that 70s folk rock sound. So it's a little psychedelic, I guess. Also, so yeah, some of the changes in directions, it may cause red flags for some fans who, like, kind of miss Tay Strathairn leaving the band, but that is until you hear the album. Does their ambition pay off? Yes, it does. I'm not going to say this record is better than Nothing Is Wrong, or All Your Favorite Bands, their last full-length record, which All Your Favorite Bands is actually my favorite record of 2015. That record is great. I mean, great. And, and not that this record isn't great, it's, great, it's not better than, some of Dawes' best records, but I will admit it's definitely still a record that I think is a really solid record, and definitely still is, sounds very much like the Dawes pretty much like the Dawes I pretty much knew and loved, but, definitely a little more, they definitely breathe some new life here into this record that I really like a lot. So I'm just going to talk about specific and, it's like their second attempt at a pop rock album, I think. They sort of made an attempt at doing something a little more accessible with their third album, Stories Don't End. But, unfortunately, it didn't really work out on that record, making that definitely the weakest album in their discography, which I've heard a few other fans say that, but, really, that record just kind of was a little formulaic and, didn't really work too much for the band. But here, the more accessible sound is way less formulaic and much more ambitious, and definitely it's definitely a much more fun album, I will admit. The opening track on this album, One of Us, is probably the funkiest song Dawes have ever done, with its fuzzy bass line, dirty, scrawling guitar riff. It's kind of sexy drumming, as well as this kind of, really funky, like, keyboard styling on there too. And also, it has a little bit of a garage rock flair, considering how, considering the fact that that it kind of takes a lo-fi approach, lo-fi distorted approach in the vocal department for Taylor Goldsmith. And the lyrics on that song are pretty interesting. It's sort of, definitely does show, Taylor's ability to create a really interesting narrative on there. Like, he seems to be talking about this friend of his that seems to have a family with a ton of just kind of, mental, like, a bunch of, like, mental problems and with connecting and stuff like that. Like, for example, he mentions, how the father of this family learns foreign names for all his fears before he finds out, that spirits he detected for the data he's collected turned out to just be ringing in his ears. And then also, the sister of this family is, like, mortally offended by the mispronunciation of her name. And also, like, the brother has, like, secret dreams of learning how to dance, so he, like, sends the protagonist in the song poems and stuff like that. And then in the chorus, Taylor sort of, mentions, like, just how, well, you talk like one of them, but, you, you look like one of them, but you talk like one of us. And you'll say, well, don't believe everything they say, because, they seem to have a bunch of dysfunctional problems and stuff like that. So it's kind of visceral, but at the same time, it's definitely got a pretty smart message to it, and the chorus on this thing is really catchy and optimistic with these glistening acoustic guitars that I think sound really nice on there. And it does have a pretty cool guitar solo in the middle. It is a great opener for the album, but my one issue with this track is that the multitude of distorted elements on here makes it seem a little muddy in terms of the production and the mixing, and also it can be maybe a little, like, which makes it seem a little muddy for the ears, probably especially when they get to the guitar solo or something like that, but still, great opener that I think starts out the album on a pretty high note. Some of the singles on this record include the song Roll With The Punches, another great, which is definitely one of my favorite songs on the album. It's kind of a song sort of talking about, how, sort of talking about, people kind of, trying out their separate lives, and let me get out the booklet to see what some of the lyrics deal with on here. Yeah, and it sort of has some wordplay on it, like most of the damage was collateral, but still inspired some debate, and it does mention how, all the people that we love are the same ones we can also hate, or something like that. Yeah, and so it's kind of a, song about, kind of this troubled, dysfunctional relationship between these, like, two people, and talking about, how they're just both retreating to their sides. So it's kind of a morbid song lyrically, but then also it definitely has a very just hopeful chorus that says, you just roll with the punches until you can't feel a thing. So it's definitely very hopeful, as well as, kind of, morbid lyrically, and the chorus on that thing is absolutely catchy, and it makes sense as one of the lead singles from here. And it definitely does. I like how this album shows that the band just knows how to write a great hook too. Like, I love the refrain on this track. You just roll with the punches on here. And the other single on here is When the Tequila Runs Out. And on this track, we definitely do see a side of Dawes we've never really seen before. I would have never saw this coming, but, that's kind of what I like about this song. It's, it's definitely a, also forgot to mention, Blake Mills does have, some pretty, prominent writing credits on this album, as well as all the production on here. This song is kind of a, boozy, 70s leaning, folk pop rock jam right here. That's semi-psychedelic, I think, a little bit. And it is sort of this tale of the protagonist, goes to, this party, and, he sort of seems, and he sort of, and he sort of talks about sort of, you know, and he sort of talks about his experience in there, and, you know, kind of, you know, he's definitely, you know, like he's definitely, you know, like he's definitely feeling pretty good about being there, but at the same time, he's also, you know, he definitely does, you know, feel a little morbid about it, pretty much, you know, and he feels maybe morbid, but you know, at the same time, it's definitely kind of a morbid vignette that you know, Taylor's talking about here on this track. Even though he says stuff like they had Thriller on the stereo, not the album, just the song. For two dancers all at white that nobody really knew. Some girls forgot their bathing suits, but felt like jumping in the pool. Ran after making sure the underwater lights were on. And then he brings pretty dark stuff, like our host busts out of his bedroom with his glasses slightly bent. He gets up on the diving board to tell us how he feels, and also like you know, over kind of a, you know, sad, kind of somber electric piano we're getting. He sort of, you know, talks about you know, this you know, seeing his past life passed out, and you know, has a grimace on his mouth, and seems to be in pain pretty much. And then, you know, they kind of realize, you know, they think the party's done or something like that. And so like, you know, it's kind of a morbid, sort of dark vignette, but at the same time still has this certain kind of fun, like sort of carefree vibe to it that I really like a lot. And like on the song, we're getting this groaning slide guitar, some swagger from the hand percussion as well. This like twinkling glockenspiel that I think colors the track really nicely, and also on the chorus we're getting some huge group vocals on this chorus, and there's like an all-star cast of guest singers on that track too, including Brittany Howard of Alabama Shakes, as well as Jen James from My Morning Jacket, who also sings on the title track, which I'll get into in a minute, and stuff like that. So it's definitely kind of a all-out party jam, pretty much, which I would have never expected, but still definitely has a self-awareness to it that still makes it pretty admirable. And the chorus on here is just really fun, and it has sort of an absurd lyric of, when the tequila runs out, we'll be drinking champagne, which is sort of a joke because it sort of talks about maybe doing something like debaucherous, as, you know, tequila is pretty strong stuff and stuff like that. So some of the deeper cuts on this album that I do really like, I love the title track on this album, We're All Gonna Die. It's definitely pretty, the lyrics on here, it's sort of another song that, again, the lyrics on it are pretty dark, but at the same time still has poignancy to them that, you know, I do like how the band is really poignant, you know, considering a lot of indie rock out there is kind of self-serious and, you know, gets a little pretentious at sometimes. But as for Dawes, they definitely put in a little bit of optimism in there that's kind of refreshing, and I think this song really shows that. Like on lines like, you know, he talks about, you know, a girl that disappeared, and he wonders if it was really the road that pulled him away, or if he's still a victim of his fears. And, you know, talking about how, you know, I should go see her for, even if it's just for a couple of days. And, you know, one of my favorite vignettes on here, one that's definitely pretty poignant, is when he talks about, you know, if her plane goes down on her way to me, she would probably smile and think of her life, while everyone else is freaking out because they're all gonna die or something like that. And also, like, has some really, it also shows the band sort of expanding beyond their sound a little bit by adding in a really beautiful string arrangement. And I love that part in the middle where the guitar solo occurs and plays along with the strings. It's definitely pretty, you know, it's, you know, very harmonious and quite gorgeous, I will admit. Another ballad on here that I really like is the song Roll Tide, which, you know, has song Roll Tide, which has Griffin Goldsmith on lead vocals. And it's definitely sort of a, it's a song sort of about this kind of, dysfunctional relationship that's kind of breaking apart, and, he's sort of apart, and, it sort of mentions how, if the, like, and the cup, and it definitely sees the couple saying, like, if they don't want to let go, we'd have to fight, something like that. And yeah, it's definitely very moving, and Griffin Goldsmith actually gives off a really moving kind of raw performance here, since he's, kind of not a trained voice pretty much, but he nailed it on this track, I will admit. Adding some raw emotion in there. And then another one of my favorite songs on here is Less Than 5 Miles Away, which, has which is one of the more somber cuts on the album, but still is, like, very euphoric, pretty much. And it definitely does show Taylor's ability to bring up some vivid imagery and, make it sound, very poetic, pretty much, when he, mentions, like, listening to a mother sick with cancer and wondering what she's gonna say. The song Picture of a Man has a little bit of a Southern soul vibe to it, almost, and it's definitely another track on here I really like. Love the kind of soulful organ stylings on the track. And has, some pretty nice, it has some pretty unique percussion sort of, textures on it, especially like during that end section, with that kind of psychedelic guitar solo at the end, which sounds really nice. Nice on there. I won't go into like super big detail about some of the lyrics because we're kind of running out of time here a little bit, but the lyrics on here are pretty good, and also this song features some backup vocals from the indie rock duo Lucius, who actually delivered some really nice sort of female background vocals in the refrain of the song. Oh man, can you picture it? Excuse me. Then we have the song For No Good Reason, which has sort of a lyrical concept kind of similar to the song A Little Bit of Everything off of Nothing Is Wrong. Excuse me. Anyway, so it talks about 3 different people that have like 3 different issues pretty much, and sort of talking about how they try to get over it or something like that. Except it's maybe this was the case for them or something like that. Well, he talks about a little girl that that kind of gets a little emotional in this like moment that she's in, or something like that. Possibly at the deep end of a pool or something like that. And thinking maybe it's a chemical in her eye or something like that. And then, a person who sort of has this issue because he's sort of, about to get a divorce with his wife or something like that. And then there's a really morbid vignette about, this, man who, was found dead, this actor who was found dead in his Culver City home, and he looked like he was reaching for the phone or something like that. And so I'll talk about the last couple of tracks. I'll try to speed this up a little bit. There is the song Quitter, which I do like this song, but I do have kind of the same issue with this track that I do with the opening track on this album. The multitude of distorted elements does make it sound a little muddy. Not sure why the vocals at the end had to be kind of as distorted as they are. But then there's one major blemish at the end of the record, the closer, As If by Design, which the band tried to make something that sounded kind of charming on here, but it kind of sounded went off sounding a little goofy with the lyrics and the piano and stuff like that. But, but pretty much the biggest problem that I have with this song pretty much occurs in the chorus. I mean, there's this painfully shallow and kind of redundant trumpet styling that I did not enjoy at all. And also, there are these strings that don't really, save the song for me. They just kind of loom in the background, and, it goes off sounding like just kind of an obnoxious filler moment. But outside of that, this is a really great record. I mean, the band really outdid themselves on this album. Really outdid themselves on this album, and I thought it was kind of refreshing to see how the band would crank out some really nice hooks on here too, as well as some good stories and stuff like that. Because I do like some of their older records, but I felt they were maybe a little more homogenous and didn't really have that much variety to it. But this one certainly has some versatility to it that I really appreciate a lot. So, it's definitely a record that it's different, but, not in a way that I think is going to alienate a whole lot of fans. Still has kind of their, Southern California folk rock tendencies and stuff like that. So, I'm feeling a strong 8 out of 10 for the new Dawes album, We're All Gonna Die, and I'll see you for episode 125.